And with that, we begin with someone whose work has pushed us to think more critically about honor, about inequality, education, and public systems.
It is a huge honor to welcome Professor Ankur Sareen. Professor Sareen is a faculty member at the IIM Ahmedabad, where he works at the intersection of public systems, economics, education, and social policy. Trained in public policy at the University of Chicago, his work has consistently examined the structures that shape inequality, access, and opportunity in contemporary India. Through his research on education reform, social entrepreneurship, child rights, and public institutions, Professor Sareen has pushed conversations beyond abstract policy toward the lived realities. From the implementation to the right to Education Act to studies on public systems and social responsibility. His work reminds us that inequality is not accidental. It is often structural, reproduced quietly through institutions we take for granted at face value. Please join us in welcoming Professor Ankur Sareen for the keynote address. It's up to you.
You can use the dice also.
It works.
Thank you. I've come to India Habitat Center quite often, more often than I should, given that I live in Ahmedabad. But I don't think I felt the same level of happiness as I do today because, as you said, ऐसा कमी होता है कि जिन लोगों की बात हो रही होती है वो भी रूम में होते हैं और उनको बात करने का अवसर मिलता है और ना और पूरा हक भी उन्हीं का है. आपने इंट्रोडक्शन तो बहुत बढ़िया दे दिया मेरा, जो ज़्यादा ही बोल दिया, पर एक बात आप कहना भूल गए कि मैं पैदाइशी प्रिविलेज्ड हूँ और मैं यहाँ खड़ा हूँ क्योंकि मेरे बहुत प्रिविलेजेस रहे हैं. तो और सब चीज़ें तो ठीक हैं, बट मेरी जो शुरुआत हुई थी वो बहुत ही प्रिविलेज पोजीशन से हुई थी और वो प्रिविलेजेस का फ़ायदा मुझे आज तक मिलता है. तो जो सही में जो लोग हकदार हैं यहाँ खड़े होने के लिए और अपनी बात रखने के लिए, वो वहाँ बैठे हैं. और आज के समय में जब होपफुल होना थोड़ा मुश्किल रहता है, कभी कभी डिप्रेशन ज़्यादा छाया जाता है, तो उस समय में इस कार्यक्रम में एक अवसर मिलना, आप लोगों से बात करना, ये हमारे लिए एक ऑनर है, ये एक हमारे लिए एक और प्रिविलेज है. और एक तो बहुत ज़रूरी है कि आप सब जो बैठे हैं, ये डे आपके लिए है, ये डे इज़ अ सेलिब्रेशन. ये आपकी खुशी में हमको एक खुशी में मिलने का एक भाग, ये अवसर मिला है. तो आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई. ये आपके लिए ये जो जर्नी रही होगी वो आसान बिल्कुल नहीं रही होगी और ना आगे भी आसान होगी, पर फिर भी आज का दिन तो आपके सेलिब्रेशन का है, आज का दिन तो आपकी खुशी का है. और and it is very important that those with privilege like me don't spread our cynicism to those with hope and the inspired minds that they have. So I have to be very careful in terms of how I respond to some of the prompts that have been shared with me. But I also feel it a little bit obligated to contextualize the larger landscape that I feel that we are in as far as questions around inequality and social mobility and social justice go. क्योंकि अगर मैं वो ना करूं तो I think I will disrespect the achievements of our beautiful Karta scholars, the inspiring Karta scholars. So it is to actually give them the credit they deserve that I might speak a little bit in depressive terms also. So it's not to bring anybody down, but to actually be able to put their achievements in some perspective. As far as inequality goes, I mean, it's in India, you don't need any statistics. You don't need data. You need to just open your eyes. You need to open your ears. You need to walk around, right? And it's in your face. You can't escape it. Having said that, I mean, have things changed? Of course, they have changed. Inequality, if by the best measures that we have in terms of how unequal a society we are today, the best estimate say कि जो जब ब्रिटिश राज करते थे तो जितनी इनइक्वालिटी तब थी, अब फिर से हमारे समाज में वही असमानता आ गई है. 1980 तक कम हुई थी असमानता, पर उसके बाद अब जो हमारी लेवल ऑफ असमानता है, जो इनइक्वालिटी है, अब वो उसी लेवल पे है जब ब्रिटिश राज करते थे. तो वो ब्रिटिश तो छोड़ गए, बट हम जैसे लोग को छोड़ गए. तो ये भी सच्चाई है. पर ये भी सच्चाई है कि जब 1980 की जो मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, और उससे अगर हम देखें तो जो ग्रोथ की बात करते हैं, जो एक तरीके से एफ्लुएंस की बात करते हैं, जो some aspects of quality of life, material life have improved a lot. There are, one could list them down, but I mean, the basic floor has improved, has gone up. If you talk about sort of abject poverty, the number of people who have transitioned out of poverty in maybe even the last 10 years, that is a remarkable statistic, a remarkable number. And we should not take that achievement for granted either. That is an achievement that has occurred. But it has occurred primarily on the basis of constitutional rights and programs that have emanated from the Constitution. And I think it's important to reiterate the importance of our Constitution, जो हमारा संविधान है. क्योंकि जब हम इनइक्वालिटी की बात करते हैं, जब हम इक्वालिटी की बात करते हैं, जब हम सोशल जस्टिस की बात करते हैं, जो हम सोशल मोबिलिटी की बात करते हैं, तो इसका क्यों हम बात करें इस बातों को, और ये प्रिंसिपल्स कहाँ से आते हैं? ये आपको कोई धर्म में नहीं मिलेंगे. कोई धर्म नहीं बोलता कि समानता होनी चाहिए, कोई धर्म नहीं बोलता कि सोशल मोबिलिटी होनी चाहिए. बट एक किताब है जो बोलती है, और वह है हमारा संविधान. और हमारा संविधान साफ साफ कहता है कि हमें इक्वालिटी ऑफ स्टेटस एंड अपॉर्चुनिटी. तो अगर एक चीज है हमारे पास जिसके मूल्य पे, जिसके फाउंडेशंस पे हम एक हक मांग सकते हैं, and I say this with some degree of emotions because I've had students who have come up. I teach at IIM Ahmedabad. I've taught there for 20 years, and have come. They didn't have the help and support of an initiative like Karta, who've come up and told me after finishing 2 years that we didn't feel that we belonged here. We never felt that a place like this was made for us. And this is a student who's achieved so much, who has not only entered one of the most elite competitive spaces, who's actually graduated, and they felt this place did not belong to us. And I think that's a failure of an institution. It's a failure of an institution when any student who has entered there, worked hard there, and somehow goes out feeling in some ways that we were not supposed to be here, right? And then there's this feeling of association of sort of believing that we are here because of charity. कि somebody was feeling good about something or wanted to feel good about something, किसी ने हमें मदद की. And I think that's not the frame that any student should be graduating from, and that's not the truth. But it comes from this very distorted idea of merit that we have created in not only our society, right, but in the larger society as such. We draw a line somewhere, and then we ask, can you cross that line? Right, and the more elite, prestigious institutions we go, we sort of keep drawing the line higher and higher. We don't step back and ask कि ये आप शुरुआत कहाँ से हुई, आपकी डिस्टेंस क्या था आपने जो कवर किया, एंड उस डिस्टेंस को हम मेरिट क्यों नहीं बोलते. तो हम रिजर्वेशंस को क्रिटिसाइज करते हैं, हम कोटास को क्रिटिसाइज करते हैं, और उसको बोलते हैं कि वो मेरिट का कॉम्प्रोमाइज है. तो मैं हर बार अपने स्टूडेंट्स को जब कोर्स पढ़ाता हूँ तो उनके बोलता हूँ जो रिजर्वेशंस और कोटास के अगेंस्ट होते हैं, कि मैं बोलता हूँ कि ठीक है, चलो मैं आपकी बात मान लूँ, मेरिट का कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ है, पर मैं पूरे मेरिट तो मैं आई एम अ फर्म बिलीवर इन मेरिट। तो एक दो चीज़ें करते हैं, एक डील बनाते हैं। आजकल ट्रम्प के ज़माने में डील बनाना बहुत ज़रूरी पड़ता है, तो मैं भी उनको डील बनाता हूँ उनसे। मैं बोलता हूँ 2 चीज़, ठीक है, हटा देंगे सब कोटास, रिजर्वेशंस, आप मुझे 2 चीज़ दे दो। एक, कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम, हर बच्चा, प्राइवेट स्कूल्स नहीं होंगे, हर बच्चे कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम्स में जाएंगे बेस्ट। और ये पूरी दुनिया में कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम्स ही चलता है, सरकार अच्छे स्कूल्स चलाती है ताकि सब के बच्चे वही स्कूल्स में जाके पढ़ें। तो कॉमन स्कूल सिस्टम की मैं पहली बात करता हूँ। ज़्यादातर लोग जो स्टूडेंट्स होते हैं वो मान लेते हैं हाँ ठीक है, अच्छा आइडिया है, और सब जगह भी चला है। फिर मैं दूसरा कंडीशन मांगता हूँ, बोलता हूँ ठीक है, अब देखो हमें तो पूरा मेरिटोरियस सोसाइटी चाहिए, तो एक और चीज़ करेंगे, 100% इनहेरिटेंस टैक्स, मतलब एस्टेट टैक्स, कि आप अपने बच्चों, मतलब जो भी आपने कमाया, अपनी ज़िंदगी जी, अच्छी सी ज़िंदगी जी, पर जब गुजर गए तो जो भी आपके पास है वो सरकार के पास जाएगा, और सरकार उसको अच्छे स्कूल्स, अच्छे अस्पताल, अच्छे रोड, अच्छी लाइब्रेरियाँ, पार्क, हाउसिंग, सब में इन्वेस्ट करेगी। और फिर हम देखते हैं कि कौन मेरिट में आगे आता है। वो अच्छा नहीं लगता है। एंड तब मेरिट की बात नहीं होती, तब होती है बात, अरे फिर इंसेंटिव क्या रहेगा कुछ करने को, हम तो मेरिट की बात कर रहे थे ना। बट एनीवे, that's a provocation that I put forth to my students. And one of the reasons that I want to put forth that provocation is also when we try to understand inequality. See, I don't think anybody aspires to live in a world which is flat, which is equal. Right? The question is, what does it translate to? I will not be in favor, अगर आप मुझे बोलें कि will you actually be in favor of 100% inheritance tax? I will have that insecurity कि no, मेरे बच्चे, उनका क्या होगा? I mean, that is a motivation, right? But the question is, how much my own income matters. हमारे घर में कितने पैसे हैं, वो कितना फर्क पड़ता है उससे हमारी जिंदगी में, is not just a function of how I feel about money, but also the social system and the social public system and the public infrastructure that is around us. If we have good public transportation, if we have good public schools, if we have good healthcare, if we have good public housing, our own income matters a whole lot less in terms of determining our quality of life. It's a very basic math, and it's a basic empirical experience of most countries. If you look at this idea of happiness, what determines happiness across the world is not GDP per capita or not growth itself. It's the quality of public services, right? And if you have to tackle this problem of inequality, if you have to in some ways address many of the issues there, we have to raise the quality of those public services. And that's why that's why the discourse in some ways of sort of individualizing welfare, individualizing the idea of sort of quality of life is a little bit dangerous one, because we're losing sense of this idea that there is a collective out there. Just for example, I mean, the idea of skilling. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, of course, everybody needs skills, right? And skills are essential to work in the labor place. And a functioning labor place is important for growth, for resources. But when we choose specific areas of skilling, what are the criteria that we choose? Why do we continue to skill people to work in the auto sector? And no disrespect to the auto sector, but why do we continue to skill people to work in the auto sector despite the fact that wages have been declining, despite the fact for workers have been declining, not for managers, that the precarity, contractual labor has been increasing? When we choose sectors for skilling, can we be a little bit more conscious about what does this translate to the quality of the life of the people who we are trying to skill. So whose needs are we trying to fulfill, right? And that sense, and it's not that if we fulfill these needs, we will be any poorer a nation. We will in fact be able to reach a better equilibrium, right? So that's the idea of a collective that we have to, in a sense, reimagine. But as I said, this is not the time for cynicism. It's not the time for depression. It's a time for celebrations. And one of the beautiful things about the future, and I think that's something that, I think maybe by the time we realize that we are too old for it, but nevertheless, the future has not been determined. No matter how cynical, no matter how things might bad look, that's the beauty of future. It is to be determined. None of us over here have any idea what the future is going to be. So either we can sit out of it and be as cynical and critical and all of that, or we try to shape the future as the way that we want to shape. And so congratulations to the team, the Karta team, all the supporters, all the people out there, because you are the ones who are actually shaping this future. And the future belongs to you. But remember, if you ever need to step back and sort of look back at one piece, your foundation, and so that nobody ever, and you don't look at yourself in any way as a sort of a charity case, look at that constitution. That constitution belongs to all of us. The constitution gives us certain rights. It does also gives us duties, but please do not ever forget that constitution as the moral foundations for everything that you all deserve, given your hard work and the inspiration that you all have provided to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sarin, so much for an insightful session. And Professor Sarin would also like to take some of the questions. If not now, they can be also dealt on laterwards. And the keynote reminded us that inequality in India is not accidental. It has been reproduced quietly through systems, institutions, and invisible barriers that shape who gets the access, who gets the confidence, and who does not. Your reflections on meritocracy and especially the Constitution remind us that opportunity cannot be called equal when people begin with such unequal realities. And perhaps you left us with the most important questions. Can institutions and the Constitution be used to move simply beyond giving access and begin creating spaces which can truly where people can truly belong and thrive? And I think many of us are leaving this session with difficult but necessary questions, not for ourselves, but also of the systems and institutions around us. And that's exactly why this conversation matters.